Hello YouTube. Today we'll speak about ancient China and the legendary Yellow Emperor, one of the first emperors of China, and his incredible legacy. Archaeological evidence suggests that China is one of the cradles of the human race. The earliest known human in China, whose fossilized skull was unearthed in Huang-ti province in 1963, is believed to date back to 600,000 BC. Now, the Yellow Emperor, he lived later. However, I'm not so sure he was human. But he left a tremendous legacy and was one of the most important historical personalities in Chinese history. But who exactly was Huang-ti? Let's not confuse him with the Huang-ti, the 3rd century BC tyrant who built the Great Wall. The Yellow Emperor we're speaking about is said to have lived in the 27th century BC, in those misty reaches of time before the Shang dynasty. According to tradition, and also in very interesting research by a Jesuit scientist who operated in China a few centuries ago, Huang-ti lived from 2697 to 2598 BC. But who or what was he? Huang-ti was one of those ancient culture bearers who brought civilization to humanity. He's similar to Imhotep or Thoth of the Egyptians, or Quetzalcoatl of the Aztecs. Perhaps some light may be shed upon the mystery of Huang-ti by discovery in China's southwestern province of Sichuan. Structures have been uncovered there that go back 4,500 years. And if you ever are in China, in Sichuan, do not miss any of their archaeological findings. You will see incredible artifacts. Now, according to Chinese tradition, the Chinese people originated in the Huanghe Yellow River Valley. The legends tell of a creator, Pan-Ku, who was succeeded by a series of heavenly, terrestrial, and human sovereigns. Rice was grown in eastern China about 5500 BC, and about 5 centuries later, an agricultural society developed in the area. That's very interesting because the emperor's legacy touches upon rice as well. But let's look at what he has done for the Chinese people. But for those who, of course, are interested to find out how he came to be on earth, I will give you this ancient pre-Buddhist Chinese legend coming back from Tibet. But it describes how a mighty friend of virtue and kindness had appeared on earth. It goes like this. Egg created by magical forces of gods Sa and Baal exited under the action of its own weight from the divine bosom of empty sky. The shell became a defensive armor. The casing defended like armor, and that which is white became a source of strength for heroes. The inner casing became a stronghold for those who had dwelt in it. From the very center of the egg came a human being, possessor of magic force. We'll get more into the ancient alien angle and legends, but the Yellow Emperor, as I mentioned, was a tremendous influence on the people of China. And here's why. The Chinese civilization owes much to him. Agriculture and husbandry developed simultaneously in the ancient times when he ruled. Silkworms were raised initially in China during the Yellow Emperor's reign. According to Chinese legend, the mystery of silk was solved as early as 2600 BC. Now please remember this date, 2600 BC. As the story goes, Sai Ling, the young wife of Huang-ti, discovered silk when she dropped a cocoon into her tea. The cocoon unraveled before her eyes, revealing long, luminous threads of silk. Yue Ju Shu, says Emperor Huang-ti, started the silk clothing industry and cultivated mulberry for silkworms and hemp. As the Chinese archaeologists state, it is from historical records. The Yellow Emperor was a highly gifted son of heaven. Legend has it that he was the originator of many arts. From him came the making of clothes, manufacturing of boats and vehicles, building of houses and palaces, and much more. He also directed court officials Lung Ling to make musical instruments, Da Nao to compile the heavenly stems and the earthly branches. The 10 heavenly stems and the 12 earthly branches are used in combination to designate years, months, days, and hours. He also directed Xiang-Qie to invent the Chinese characters. Thus, the Chinese tradition attributes the invention of writing to Xiang-Qie, a minister of the heroic Yellow Emperor. Here's something interesting. It is said that when man first learned to write, all spirits cried in agony as the innermost secrets of nature were thus revealed. But speaking about nature, we also need to speak about medicine. And Chinese medicine basically dates back to 2600 BC, where different methods of hypnosis have been used. Ancient Chinese medicine used medical procedure that were of hypnotic nature. Also, acupuncture, a therapy that is still practiced worldwide, originated from the Nui Qing, which was conceived by Huang-ti around 2600 BC. Among the herbs discussed there was Ma Huang, which is still used today to produce ephedrine, and widely used by athletes. And it's also on the International Olympic Committee list of banned substances with known performance-enhancing properties. Also, about the same time, the Chinese started treating ulcers. Beriberi, the disease resulting from severe thiamine deficiency, was described in Chinese literature as early as 2600 BC. Thiamine deficiency affects the cardiovascular, nervous, muscular, and gastrointestinal systems. And that's what the ancient Chinese, under the Yellow Emperor, were learning to treat. But not only medicine was involved. Let's speak about the ancient Chinese sex manuals. The oldest books on love are the Chinese handbooks of sex, written 5,000 years ago by none other than the legendary Yellow Emperor. They contain, among other things, a first-rate description of gonorrhea. It is also believed that Tao of love coupling originated from Huang-ti around 2600 BC. The Yellow Emperor had 3 female sex advisors: the plain girl, the mystery girl, and the harvest girl, and 1 male sex doctor, Peng Tzu, who had lived for 800 years. Their conversations, questions and answers, were compiled into a book entitled Su Nui Qing, named after one of the advisors. This book became the sexual Bible and medical guidebook for many generations. But not only this was his achievement. Human endeavors to create tools to manipulate data actually date at least as far back as 2600 BC, when the Chinese invented the abacus. Chinese written records date the first copper mining at about 2600 BC. The Chinese Lunar New Year is the longest chronological record in history, dating from 2600 BC, when Huang-ti introduced the first cycle of the zodiac. The oldest written record of the sighting of Aurora Borealis was Chinese. It was referred to as the mother of the Yellow Emperor. And of course, Huang-ti is credited with the invention of government and Taoism. The Chinese invented a complex system of picture writing using forms called ideograms, pictograms, and phonograms. And such early forms of Chinese became known through the discovery by the archaeologists of the oracle bones with writings inscribed on them. This is very interesting, and of course all of it goes back to the times of the Yellow Emperor. Now, another subject that the Yellow Emperor should be credited with was the Chinese mathematics. The origin of Chinese math is surrounded by myth because many of the ancient mathematical writings were lost through the decay of the bamboo material they were written on. It is believed that the Emperor Huang-ti was the first patron of mathematics. Under his rule, his minister Tai Mai and Liu Shu devised the sexagesimal-based number system and corresponding arithmetic. The Chinese believed that numbers had philosophical and metaphysical properties. They used numbers to achieve spiritual harmony with the cosmos. They believed that man's existence depended upon numerically specified actions and obligations. That's very interesting. If the Yellow Emperor was an alien being, not of this earth, and we will touch upon it a little bit later on, we will know at least what is it that the humans had been taught. But peaceful mathematics was not the only art, let's put it that way, that Huang-ti was teaching his subjects. In 2674 BC, Huang-ti's soldiers used an early weapons discipline to gain a decisive victory in an important battle. The emperor taught his troops a form of self-defense and organized them into an effective military formations force. Something else equally important was invented 74 years later, a series of medical gymnastics called Kung Fu. This new martial arts combined specific physical movements with breathing techniques in order to keep the body and mind healthy. The four useful branches of military knowledge were concerned with mountains, rivers, marshes, and plains, and enabled the Yellow Emperor to vanquish four different kings. Actually, Napoleon had similar beliefs about the art of war. Ancient Chinese writings confirm that the Yellow Emperor was responsible for the invention of warfare. In the Liu Tao book, it is mentioned that Huang-ti fought 70 battles and pacified the empire. Cao Kung's explanation is that the Yellow Emperor was the first to institute the feudal system of vassal princes, each of whom, to the number of 4, originally bore the title of emperor. Li Chuan tells us that the art of war originated under Huang-ti, who received it from his minister Feng. Huang-ti formed an alliance with Yang-di in later years against the invasion of Qiu, the chieftain of the Zhuli tribe. A decisive battle was fought at Zhuolu in the northwest of the present Hebei province. Legend goes that at the beginning of the battle, Qiu sneezed out a thick fog that lasted 3 days, and the soldiers of Huang-ti could not tell their directions. Fortunately, Huang-ti led his men out of the fog by the compass chariot that he invented, and won the complete victory. This was a magnificent vehicle, and I've read a number of accounts by Russian scientists who have studied ancient China. Strict and impartial, Huang-ti was able to get rid of the evil for the people. It was said that Gu, son of the god of mountain Zhongshan, named Zhulong, murdered another god at Mount Kunlun in collaboration with a deity called Qin-pi. The Yellow Emperor was indignant at their atrocity and immediately had them killed. He was all-powerful, but we'll learn a little bit more about how he acted with the humans. But here it's important to establish something else. Although ascetics and hermits such as Shen Tao who advocated that one must abandon knowledge and discard self, first wrote about the Tao. It is with the 6th century BC philosopher Lao Tzu, or Old Sage, that the philosophy of Taoism really began. Some scholars believe that he was a slightly older contemporary of Confucius. There is also a close association between Lao Tzu and the legendary Yellow Emperor Huang-ti. Although deeply rooted in Chinese history, Taoism is a way of life rather than a religion. Its essence is strongly based on Lao Tzu's collection of writings known as the Tao Te Ching. What was the association between an emperor who was gone more than 2,000 years and the court librarian who founded Taoism? Now let me step back and tell you something about ancient libraries. The earliest known libraries were connected with palaces and temples. In China, records of the Shang dynasty were written on animal bones and tortoise shells. There was an early library called the Healing Place of the Soul in the palace of the Egypt's King Ramses II, and it had thousands of papyrus scrolls. There was another one in Assyria. Now, the first known Chinese librarian was the philosopher Lao Tse, who was appointed keeper of the royal historical records for the Zhou rulers about 550 BC. But there was a connection between him and the old Emperor of China, the Yellow Emperor. Alongside the development of Taoism as a philosophy, another more strictly religious interpretation of Taoism was evolving. The religious Taoism has its own temples, priests, rites, and symbolic images. Lao Tzu was venerated as a saint, and imperial sacrifices were made to him. So prominent were astrology, alchemy, and divination in this stream of Taoism that it had veered off from the philosophy to occultism, to the occult. This movement was sometimes known as the Huanglao, after the legendary Huang-ti and Lao Tzu. The question is, was the knowledge of strange powers given to Lao Tzu by those who held the legacy of the Yellow Emperor? Was it done so? Because definitely he knew very much that occurred 2,000 years before Lao Tzu came on the scene. But let's look closely at the explanation for the essence of Huang-ti. The ancient Chinese records mention amazing, wise, and humane beings, the sons of heaven, who had done so much for the savage dwellers of the Huanghe River Valley. Before the sons of heaven appeared on earth, familiar celestial phenomena preceded all such appearances. Before Huang-ti was born, there was radiance from the great star Qi and the Dipper constellation. We know it as Ursa Major. Of all the sons of heaven, it was Huang-ti who left the largest footprint in Chinese mythology. Huang-ti was very different from other ancient heroes. He did not enlighten people, nor did he demand worship. Huang-ti and his helpers were amazingly rational beings. Of course, they did teach the natives all kinds of useful sciences, including acupuncture. However, their own affairs were most important to them, and such affairs were dominated by the creation of complex and unfortunately incomprehensible, at least to us, apparatuses and devices. Valentin Krapiva, a noted Ukrainian researcher of anomalous phenomena who passed away a few years ago, revealed in his book UFOs, a hovering enigma of history, published in Ukraine in 1991, that Huang-ti manufactured 12 gigantic mirrors of unknown nature and used them to follow the moon or following the moon. Archaeologists in modern times describe another strange detail. They cite the biography of Huang-ti that when the emperor met the West Empress at the mountains of Wangwu, 12 large mirrors were wrought for use month by month. According to Krapiva, the biography of Huang-ti was based on mysterious legends. What did the ancient scribes mean saying following the moon? What drove Huang-ti to establish a connection between the mirrors and the moon? What was it that was collected on the surface of the mirrors? But there is something else equally fascinating, and I'm going to speak about the so-called miraculous tripods. Numerous sources relate that Huang-ti manufactured and used some miraculous tripods. Those tripods were not used for water, nor was there any fire to heat and prepare food in them. The purpose of such a tripod was quite different from that. It was a likeness of the great infinite, Tao, the concealed engine of the universe. A tripod was approximately 10 to 13 feet in height, but its volume was relatively small, 25 gallons. The legs carried most of its weight. A curious human observer would not be able to glance inside the tripod, but according to sources, hundreds of spirits filled its insides. Krapiva, who had studied all available sources and also used information by other Russian researchers, such I believe as Lisovsky and a few others, they were of the opinion that a functioning tripod emitted noises or voices. The legends of ancient China said that the tripods depicted dragons flying in the clouds. The tripods were most likely used for distant communications, because their locations were chosen in such a way that they would point at the star CHANGHUAN. It is from that star that Huang-ti arrived on Earth. We know that star as Regulus in the constellation Leo. The most interesting quality of the tripods was their ability to store knowledge and data. Such a tripod knew favorable and unfavorable signs, knew that which exists and that which disappeared. Moreover, a tripod could remain still, or it could walk about. It could become light and heavy. Krapiva was of the opinion that they could somehow manipulate the force of gravity. Now, something else about Huang-ti and his technological know-how. Huang-ti and most of his assistants operated in northern China. It was there that Chinese civilization subsequently developed. The south of China was developed by entities whose exact nature is not easily determined. Ancient sources named them as Qi Yu and his brothers. Perhaps the discovery on the site at Chengdu and subsequent excavations will shed some light on those who had developed the south and the west. Krapiva was able to collect some information about Qi Yu. Just like Huang-ti, Qi Yu had 4 eyes and 6 arms. Strangest of all was Qi Yu's head. It was made from copper and had a metallic forehead and tridents in place of ears. According to local legends, the metallic head was cut off and buried separately. Years later, this head continued to emit heat. Occasionally, a reddish, steam-like cloud would come from the burial site. The locals worshipped it. Qi Yu was able to move over rugged areas and even fly for short periods of time. His taste for food was quite impressive. All sources suggest that the creature ate stones and sand. In this manner, he obtained the energy necessary for its movements. Were Qi Yu and his brothers living creatures, Kapila thinks that they were complex autonomous mechanisms similar to robots. Actually, only one of the creatures would have to be controlled by an intelligent life form, but the natives consider them all as living creatures, these contemporaries of the Huang-ti, and most likely part of his crew, so to say. Now, Huang-ti ruled the land for 100 years, but his lifespan was much greater. Some sources suggest that he lived for 300 years. Where he spent the rest of his life and what activities he was engaged in are questions open to speculation. There are Taoist sources which state unambiguously that after 100 years of his rule, Huang-ti returned to his home star, ascended the heavens, and became the ruler of the great infinite, again turning into the star CHANGHUAN, Regulus, the home star to which his tripods pointed. Modern astronomers have identified an ancient Chinese drawing of the CHANGHUAN constellation as Leo. Its brightest star, Alpha Leo, is Regulus. We do not know much about this star, but there are evidently very few similarities between our star and the Regulus. There is one very curious similarity, however. In the Regulus star system, there exists a radio source that emits signals in metric wave bands. In our solar system, there is also such a source. We call it Earth. Now, let's describe the essence of thunder. Huang-ti's image was that of thunder. Aborigines in Australia have similar myths of beings that traveled at great speeds and emitted thunder. But Huang-ti was a more defined thunder, identified with elongated drums. The thunder was depicted as bunches of drums, each drum subdivided into 4 sections. Even more amazingly, one of Huang-ti's assistants was known as the Prince of Thunder. Did it mean that he was a navigator? Huang-ti, having possessed the essence of thunder, as it is said in ancient writing, was able to move through space at enormous velocities. He had a dragon, CHANGHUAN, which he used to ascend to the sun. One ancient writing mentioned that this marvelous means of transportation originates in the land where suns are born and was over 3,000 years old. But most significant is the notion that the enormous speed has an effect on the movement of time and staves off the aging process of human organism. The biography of Huang-ti states that CHANGHUAN covers quantities of miles in a day, and that a human who rides it can reach an age of 2,000 years. What secrets will the Chinese and Japanese archaeologists and others who work in China uncover? Will the discoveries lead us to the evidence that we humans have so long longed for, the evidence that we're not the only intelligent life form on Earth in past ages? In approximately the same period as the reign of Huang-ti in China, other great teachers or sacred beings were dispensing knowledge throughout the planet. Great civilizations all of a sudden appeared in Asia, Africa, South America, Europe, India, and Mesopotamia. Every day archaeologists make new findings that confirm my belief that something incredible was taking place on our planet in the same short period of history during the Neolithic and the early Bronze Age. Great early civilizations, some of which ended in abrupt and mysterious ways, emerged in such places as Crete, Egypt, Sumer, the Indus Valley, the Americas, and Africa. This great Sphinx of Giza was carved in approximately 2600 BC. At the same time, the ancient Chinese were guided by their mysterious and powerful yellow emperor, and the Egyptians under Imhotep were building their pyramids. While Stonehenge was being erected in ancient England, people along the Peruvian coast were building massive stone structures in the first city in the Americas, and I believe the date was 2627 BC. This is just one of the recent archaeological discoveries about the Neolithic. But how many more are in store now that our technology allows us to make powerful archaeological satellites that can pinpoint discoveries? Look at what's going on in Amazon. But the search for the identity of the Yellow Emperor goes on, and I'm sure we'll get other discoveries from the same age of wonders on Earth. This was a very interesting period, and I believe that, to my estimation, it took place from 2700 BC to 2300 BC. Very unusual celestial events also took place around the same time, and I will describe them in my future videos. I thank you for your time, and I ask that you subscribe to my channel. It helps in my efforts to disseminate information which I have collected for over 30 years. Thank you.